Thank you, Jay, and thank you to all of you for being present. The last time I was in Portland, and my first time, was for AWP, which is an annual conference that is often very stressful. And it was the first time I held my book in my hands, and I thought Portland was a very cool, fun place, and I enjoyed it. So I'm glad to be back in this space. I recently moved to Colorado Springs, Colorado, to take a position at Colorado College, and I went there and left a position at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, and so I feel probably most at home in art and design and interdisciplinary settings, so it's very nice again to feel akin to interdisciplinary art practice. The pieces I'm going to read today, I do have a legitimate book that is in the world, but I think I'm committed to it. I'm going to read all pieces that are not in this collection and that speak to a sense of futurity towards the next project that I'm working on. In it, I'm very interested in investigating gender fluidity in relationship to the natural world. And what I mean by that is I've never lived this far west before. So in Colorado, often my colleagues come into work on Monday and have a discourse surrounding where areas they've hiked, where they've walked, the various inclines they've climbed. It's a very integrated relationship to the natural world and excursions into nature, which is very not what I am accustomed to. I occasionally would stand and look at the Mississippi River, and that was kind of the extent of my interest in nature. Also, the terminology that has historically been used and contemporarily gets used in relationship to nature often takes on a lot of ableist language that I find very interesting as well. So I'm interested in subverting our experience of the natural world, some of the canonical notions of what a pastoral is in relationship to my own sense of desire, queerness, and how I guess I experience my subject position in the world as being more fluid than it might visibly suggest. So the first poems are ruminating on something I heard Audre Lorde say in this documentary about her time in Berlin. And she had received a letter, or phone call rather, a long distance phone call from her editor. And the editor had remarked that in her collection, Blessing the Boats, which won a National Book Award, that it seemed as though she was trying to be a man. And the way in which she was talking about same-sex desire, it must suggest, is the speaker trying to be a man. And I had a student one time that remarked that my poem gave them a notion of big dick energy. And so I became very interested in this language. What does it mean as a cisgender Black woman who is queer to create speakers or voices that can exude a big dick energy? What does that look like or mean? I will also preface the first and last poem take appropriated what could be termed as ableist slur language and are trying to subvert or recontextualize it. Parable of the Goldfinch, with a nod to Maggie Nelson. I think you overestimate the maturity of adults. If a man who thinks he is a king is mad, a king who thinks he is a king is no less so. Heavy is the light head that crowns before the leaves loosen. Beneath the mask of a father is a grapefruit, a boy in fear of his own fingers. From fear's fetus comes the notion of gratitude. We are indebted even before we are born. My occasional chin hairs are masculine plural, because our tongues are a violent pink, and I cannot speak of blood without teeth, because I never learned how to whistle, and I can't seem to kick this body. I have adopted this brittle lake of truth. On one hand sits a song, on the other my father eats a bird. Anamorphosis. When people ask how I live with myself, I turn to my mother. She has lived with me inside her. Her image, flower-pressed like a black-eyed Susan. The hour of two of a kind is upon us. What say you, bestial blossom? To be frank, requires I dress like a man who is most handsome when angry. Frank owns the house of which I am the speaker. The speaker box, a window I climbed through as a child. My father threw his brother down the stairs in a box. Both lived to tell the tale. You could say I have a calling on my life. Gendered, as luck would have it, one day I found myself opened. Just outside the door, a lion, a witch, and a war. On this next piece, I've been really thinking a lot about place in relationship to who I am in Blackness. It feels very disorienting to live in Colorado because it is not a state that is typically associated with Blackness. My partner is from Chicago and thinks very fondly of Gwendolyn Brooks as kind of a foremother to his own artistic practice. On the plane here, I watched the documentary about Toni Morrison and was steeped in this notion of Ohio as a place of presence. And I always felt that St. Louis, T.S. Eliot was what we had, right? Like I have fond memories of reciting Proof Rock or like thinking about Eliot, but Eliot felt so foreign to my own subject position. And so I've been unpacking Eliot's arguably farewell to poetry in his 4 quartets and writing my own response that I see in a quartet or a series of 4s to some of these ruminations. So this is called Quartet for the End of Time. 1. If you play me, then you play yourself. That was all the dead needed to say. To get the better of time, we got better with time. I left my body and took on the look of a man. I made him an honest woman. A diagram of this sentence builds a structure made from wind. Inside of that house is a box. Inside the box is the head of a goat. Inside the goat, a knife's quiet song. The blade of desire is the silver in my teeth. My mouth has a certain ring to it. 2. I will take you now to Afterlife's kitchen, where the salty girls cure meat with their tears. Only through time is time conquered. Come correct. Come prepared to sit at the table of contents. We bow our heads, count our blessings like little pigs, while the kingfisher waits for a shaft of sun. Run, said the bird, for the foothills of truth. Stop, 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 said the bird. There is mischief afoot. Then we sat and ate with our hands an entire field of wild time. When asked to choose a hill to die on, we wanted to kill the bird. To reconcile our pain, we made the stars into a bear. Myth made all the difference. 3. If your hand is a 5-nailed star, clock the T. Who can open the door tonight and not see themselves in black? Not I. For thousands of years, I have sat on a milk crate, stationed at the crossroads. I sing, bone, 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 bone. I don a yellow jacket and foxgloves to push out the sun. The morning is such a production. A ghost, aghast at the sound of singe, a crowned knot of fire. There is no sense to be had in the country of our making. This language, a garden of strain. No limit, soldiers, we march to the drum of empty cups. And if a spoon fell, a woman was cursed. 4. When I was sold down the river, God set down his book in the shape of a tent. That day I was born again, my limbs American letters. The stairway to heaven is yellow-boned legs, antiqued in their quadroon rust. At the gate to eternity, a lawn jockey grins, wide as the science of mercy. In his hands, a badminton racket. He swats, and we see how they run, how crickets gallop from the night's mouth like horseflies. Heaven is 1,000 chandeliers, every crystal a single body, each head a grisly sparkle. And I'll conclude if that's okay. Is that okay? Okay, wonderful. Okay. So in Colorado Springs, there is the Olympic Training Center. So we have this intersection of like ableist athleticism culture. There is the Air Force Academy. So we have a militarized presence. Most people kind of shop for groceries wearing guns. It's a very rifle-oriented kind of culture, gun-oriented culture. And then we have this beautiful natural landscape of Pikes Peak, mountains, Purple Mountain Majesty, so this rhetoric of beautiful natural surroundings. And one of the kind of landmark sites to see is called Garden of the Gods. And so in most CVS's or pharmacies or stores, there's these little books that you can buy that talk about Garden of the Gods, the history of the place and the location, and the curious phrasing and repurposing of this language, Garden of the Gods. And that language is to describe these geological formations that are red rocks that I don't even remember who it's attributed to, but someone felt it looked as though gods were sitting and convening on these natural rocks to have, I guess, a tea party or beers perhaps, I don't know. And so I was reading through this language, and I stumbled upon a variety of really interesting quotes about how this title is misnaming and disappointing, that if you actually go to the site, it's not as grandiose or grandeur as it would suggest. And then also language that kind of gets mapped, as we talked about earlier, in terms of language of curiosities, human curiosities or aberrations. And so this poem has an epigraph that was in publications by the Denver and Rio Grande Western Railroad, and it reads like this in reference to Garden of the Gods. No other point of interest is more unique or more to be admired than this curious freak of nature. Denver and Rio Grande Western Railroad. Garden of the Gods. As a matter of black, I will trade a mountain for a river. What does that tell you about my makeup? I once met a cowboy. I said, "Let me hold your body. You know I'm good for it." He gave his consent. I wore him out. On paper-thin sheets, I scissored a woman, her expression hard as a rock. She dragged her pale pink stone into the cave of my mouth. She, a cliff dweller, a figurehead alien to my bizarre beauty. I, a queer mare, a stallion in the hands of an angry god. To be human is to be homeless, the furthest removed from grandeur. I've met my makers in flower beds of milkweed. No birds of paradise were there, only ravens dark as echoes, juniper trees alive with want, coyotes aroused by the sound of bones. Our bodies are the wing section of awe. Inside of me is a desert of thistle. I've had enough of the belief in something other than my hands, the grotesque blood beneath their nails. Next to the vermilion spires, I feel small. My nature second to none. Watch the gods scurry like daddy long legs, moved by a higher power. Thank you.